wanted to show everyone the different aspects of, careers that could touch climate. This is exactly the topic that we're talking about today, the future of work and adapting to the new climate economy. I will try to keep my presentation short because I do want to open up the floor for Q&A. But this is really a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I live and breathe in this topic every day. Why climate is a new economy and it's really shaping careers across all sectors and disciplines. And as you can see from my background, I certainly have been shaped by this. I started my career as a nonprofit at the UN, launching a startup social enterprise. I went into investing in venture capital and private equity. And here I am, I'm at the school launching a new climate center. Now, so let's get started. All right, let me see what you're seeing on the screen here. Perfect. Awesome. So I have 3 parts to kind of walk you through today. Let's just start with the part 1. Why do I think climate is a new economy? And, I don't think this comes as a surprise for most of you on the call today, but, 2023, when I actually do the slides with my students, I actually show all the different graphs and I don't say what it is. And it's always a graph that in Canada, we call it the hockey stick because it looks like a graph that shoots up really high, right? Like a hockey stick. But I always show the graph to say that, there's something that is, going in the direction in which, it's not unfavorable to humankind, which is things like wildfires. 2023, we broke all the records once again. We've witnessed some of the most extreme climate events on record, destructive wildfires in Canada, deadliest wildfires in the US. All these events really underscore this urgent needs for the economic transformation. The global emissions from fossil fuel also hit record high. So why does this really matter? Not only did we just hit the record heights in all the areas in which feels like a doom and gloom areas, I also wanted to point out to the other side of the coin. It was also the year where we hit the record high on ESG compliance and emerging regulatory requirements for businesses. We also hit a record high for impact funds that hit $1.1 trillion, all of asset under management combined in 2022 and continued to grow in 2023. This is the largest size of the funds dedicated to investing in impact areas such as climate, health, the economy, and so on. It's the year in which the net zero targets, right? Companies committing to reaching to net zero, they may come from the different intentions, but they have made the commitments that they will make sure that their emissions are on par at net zero. 40% of the world's largest companies have made the commitment, which is the record high that we have ever seen. We've seen the largest legislations to address climate change, Inflation Reduction Act in the US, the EU Green New Deal, which have never been done before. It's the year of the climate tech. All the companies that have received all the investments from both public and private sectors are pouring in the money to support the areas here. I wanted to show the 2 sides of the coins here because this is something that made historic mark. It's not just the fact that we can feel doom and gloom about the future that, oh no, we're going to be breaking all the records of the extreme heat and extreme cold and extreme weather events, but there are also efforts being made, especially to really rally around and getting businesses to be a part of this new economy. Now, at COP28, as some of you may have seen, we actually saw unprecedented commitments. As I said before, there's been a lot of commitments around the net zero. We're going to get to that net zero targets. Companies will be making efforts in actually reducing the emissions, of their operations, transitioning away from fossil fuels. We've seen that more commitments ever been made. And COP28, more than 117 governments at the summit agreed that they will triple the world's renewable energy capacity, double the rate of energy efficiency improvements. I know I threw in a lot of words here, but it's the sign that shows that it's not just the businesses, it's also the governments that are coming out to say, hey, we will actually put in place some regulations, we'll put in place some things to basically make the businesses behave and change. However, the paths to global warming has sort of narrowed in the recent years because as much as we're putting, a foot forward and saying that we will, actually, make the commitments to do so, there are the gaps that are presenting today. When you think about how companies could actually reduce emissions, we call this in business, we call it the mitigation. There are different areas that requires new innovations. So, whether that's startup companies that are coming up with a new battery storage that requires new business model to rethink about how we make we take, we process, and we dispose things. These are called the mitigation efforts here. And what we're seeing today, I call this the intention action gap. Like I said, the intention has been made that we need to get to the net zero, but there's a gap on how we get there. Now, some of you may be skeptic. I see a lot of, I speak with a lot of business leaders who come to me sometimes and they say, well, look, Kookai, all right, great. We can make some commitment. We throw something out there like, greenwashing. We can say that we're doing this. No one's keeping us accountable anyway. Why do we have to actually change? Well, there's one thing about, actually making the commitment to reduce their emissions of their operations and change the way businesses do things. But another thing is about thinking of actually adapting to the climate change. These are the forces. I call this adaptation. So in business and climate, there are two strategies in which you will learn at the school. It's the mitigation efforts and adaptation efforts. On adaptation side of things, very basic. If you own, some operations, you have some facilities that are in the areas in which are prone to forest fire, or prone to, natural disasters, extreme weather events. These are some of the things that you have to be thinking about. So climate is already impacting you without you actually making that, conscious commitment to, wanting to do things better for the environment. So even if business leaders are not thinking about it, they have to be making adaptation plan. So addressing climate change really is about reimagining, restructuring our entire economy. It's about moving from this old approach, linear extractive economy, to something that is sustainable, to something that is circular, that is what I call nowadays regenerative one. This transition really changed the way we produce, we consume, and we live. And it's about creating an economy that's not only sustainable, but more resilient, equitable, and it's prosperous for everyone involved, because we are in one climate after all. So in my first point to you that I wanted to share here is that climate is not really about a sector. It's about creating a new economy. It's about thinking about ways in which each industry needs to think about how do they become more sustainable. Even again, you could be skeptic about businesses that, well, how could businesses actually want to do good for the world? Even if they may not have that intention, they do have to adapt to it because, well, it's one climate, like I said, it's impacting everyone, and they need to be thinking about that adaptation and creating resilience. So this would be my first message to everyone, is that addressing climate change is no longer an option. Well, it's no longer an option for us as an individual as well, right? It's no longer an option for companies. It's actually something that they need to be thinking about consciously. Now, that comes to my second point. It's the opportunities. Like I said to you, climate is not just, another business sector, right? When people come to me and they ask, well, Kookai, I want to work in climate. What sector should I focus on? Sure, you can focus on particular sector like the renewable energy sector and whatnot to really put your hands in climate. But climate really touches all things. And I'm going to show you exactly why. As we transition into this climate economy, the job market is evolving and new roles are emerging. Yes, you can be someone who's like an ESG specialist in a certain areas, right? But traditional roles are also being defined as well. I say that every job is a climate job. I teach ESG, so I also say every job is an ESG job. Think about this. If your company, or maybe like your household, sometimes I simplify it down, you can do an ESG assessment of your household. You can do a climate risk assessment of your household and your home as well. If a company makes a net zero commitment, they throw it out there. They make a big statement. Who does the job? The CEO says that we're going to get to net zero 2030. There's always 2030, 2050, 2045. There's always some certain timeline now because they're being pressured to do so. But they don't have the plans to do that yet because it is a very hard job to actually be thinking about decarbonizing and get to that, to where we want to go. Careers are being changed because, well, who's going to do the job? Is everyone who's involved. In the past, you may see sustainability manager, someone or like an ESG manager, that dedicated role that is, one person siloed who's working on strategy, who's working on thinking about all things sustainability related. Sometimes I joke about like in the past, it's typically the position, because I was one of them, that no one wants to have lunch with, because you're kind of like in a silo, right? You're going around talking about sustainability to everyone and they feel like it's separated. But today is very different. So you think about it, if you're wanting to become accountant now is not just thinking about financial reporting. You're thinking about non-financial reporting. So that's ESG reporting. That's thinking about carbon accounting as a skills for the future. If you want to become a product manager, thinking about launching new products, it's not just about launching the next new, I'm not sure, like shoes or, clothing brands and whatnot. You actually have to be thinking about the life cycle analysis of the shoes, which means what are the carbon, emissions involved in actually producing, the certain products that you're launching, and how you're actually going to be recycling them, or how you're actually going to dispose them in the future. The list goes on. If you're in sales, it's no longer just selling Windows or selling, the next laptop. You're selling actually what are the impact attributes for customers that are using them as well. Think of yourself as a customer. So you also want to know that. So the list goes on from supply chain managers, human resources, and marketing and communications. And some things that I always tell people that in business, yes, you can go into engineering, you can go into environmental engineering, which are amazing, areas to be. But in business, you also have a role to play as well, because you don't oftentimes, train sustainability professionals to become accountants. Accountants themselves need to become sustainability professional. Now, so my message on this point would be that just like how we learn to use computer, in the future, we will need to have and gain climate literacy. We need to understand what it means to actually get to net zero, to, what does carbon emissions entail for my operations, just like we learn how to use basic computer skills. And that in the opportunity side, environmental crisis is actually a massive opportunity in disguise. And sustainability is one of the biggest business opportunities today. So I have a slide. You can take a screen capture of this one here, because I'm going to go to my last section here. I'm running out of time. Are you climate ready? And you can think about some of the things in which, I tried to put things that I really, truly think you need to be asking yourself, but also these are some of the areas in which you can learn at Sauder, or you can learn at universities that have the focus on climate as well. Do you have the basic facts? Do you know if your company or the workplace that you're working, in the future, do they have the commitments? Do they set science-based targets? How are they going to get there? Do you want to gain the confidence to act? So these are some of the areas that you can be thinking about. And are you thinking about the opportunities in climate? Because as much as there are the risks to your businesses, the risks to the companies that you have to be thinking about, there are lots of opportunities as well. Now, my last point here, and I realize I've gone over time, maybe just a few minutes here. My last slide here is really about the ecosystem. So the ecosystem that I wanted to touch on specifically, obviously, is Vancouver, because UBC is in Vancouver, and I love Vancouver very much. Why Vancouver being sort of the place, that is perfect, that is the clean tech powerhouse of Canada. So there are 3 points that I wanted to walk you through here. Number one, we are the clean tech hub of Canada here in Vancouver. It's not only Fireside, but I point out Fireside here. Fireside Clean Tech Accelerator is Canada's largest clean tech accelerator. They started out in BC, and now they expand, nationwide, but very much strong presence in British Columbia, in Vancouver. They are based here, and they're always doing really meaningful work here. And it's not just about, an accelerator of companies that are high growth and whatnot. These are the accelerator programs in which, if you have an idea, you can join them and you can participate and you can learn about how to actually build business cases around them. It's not just Foresight as well. I should mention about entrepreneurship at UBC and also Creative Destruction Lab that is at the school as well, in which you can participate in. We also have the climate stream dedicated to entrepreneurs or people who wants to work with entrepreneurs that want to be in climate and actually make something, of a difference in the world and launching impactful startup companies. Secondly, is the Vancouver ecosystem. For me personally, Vancouver, people always ask me why, is Vancouver sort of the home of sustainability of professionals and officers? I sometimes joke around and I say it's probably the mountains, but the better answer than that is the fact that there's been decades of really innovative green policy that started here in Vancouver that really support not just startup companies, but companies that are transitioning, that are trying to do something good for the environment, but also to, run their business in general as well. And lastly, for me in particular, because I am from Thailand originally, I am from Asia, it's a strategic location. We are the gateway to the US and Asia. It's a prime location for global events for climate. In February, we have the largest climate, pretty much like a corporate sustainability climate conference happening in Vancouver in February. The center will also be hosting an event there. We're also bringing students there as what's called the Globe Forum happening in February. And then another, obviously, last plug that I'm going to be talking about here is that we've recently just established the Center for Climate and Business Solution at Sauder. And I would say this is definitely one of the points of the big point of why the ecosystem, is the place for the clean tech powerhouse or to think about working in climate. We've set up the center really to accelerate business responses to climate change. This is not something that's on the website, but I like to say that because I think it really gets to the point of why we're here and why we exist. And it's really three parts here. Number one is to equip future business leaders like yourselves. Because the new economy requires a massive shift in how traditional jobs are being redefined. We do need, new business leaders going into the market already understanding what it means to make climate conscious business decisions. We want to actually work with industry and solve their critical challenges. And lastly is to really convene thought leaders for impact. So there are some programs in which that's coming up that I can share more later. I just started, a few months ago, and the center literally is being launching as we speak. And in general, we really want to think about how business can be a part of the solutions for the climate positive future, and really bringing all the business communities together. And lastly, in my last slide here, what's in it for you really, especially with the center. So for the center, what I hope to do is to really bring in that industry projects to the students. So then you can actually get your hands on something critical. I think there's something that to say about like win-win, right? You get to really have the experience in working, what it means to actually, think about decarbonize the operations, what it means to actually calculate carbon emissions of something super complex where the supply chain has 3-4 different locations that are taking all the different parts from, but also actually creating real world impact through that as well, supporting companies in their journey. Because for me, what the center can do, not only to equip the future leaders like yourselves, but is to actually, get actionable things into, the world and actually see the results of our work. Now, my last things would be to say that whether you're interested in innovation and entrepreneurship, consulting, accounting and finance, or communication, marketing, or reporting, or other areas that I might not have mentioned here, climate touches everything. So even if you might, think about climate as being something secondary that, you might be interested in working in, certain companies that are like a climate tech companies, dedicated clean tech companies or not, climate will touch all aspects of the jobs of the future.